Thanks for staying after the panel. Right. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to be delivering a small keynote. I think my slides are coming up on the pathways to growth. Actually, the title I was given was From Idea to Unicorn, which is a very laughable idea, because if I knew the answer to go from idea to unicorn, right, I wouldn't be telling you, I'll be doing it myself. Right? But again, I think the idea is to share with you, from one's experience over the past decade, investing in startups and engaging with founders, what we think works and what doesn't appear to work. Right? And what I'm going to be doing is actually leveraging one of our investments that we made that failed to kind of share with you my thoughts around how do you find a pathway to growth. What do you do to actually scale from an idea to hopefully a successful story. Let me see if they have my deck yet. Yeah. So, but again, just to give you some background, I started investing in the African tech space in 2012, and the first startup I ever invested in was a prop tech, right? Which ended up failing, but which kind of defined where I am today, right? And so again, even though it failed, I'm grateful for that opportunity. So in 2012, I was approached by a bunch of young guys who were trying to solve this same problem I was talking about earlier, the issue of agents, real estate agents in Lagos, right? How do you find property without putting out this sign, to let sign, right? And then going from house to house to house, right? Paying all these commissions and stuff like that. And the company was called Hotbay. Some of you might have heard of that company, hotbay.com and .ng. And the idea was, can you create a virtual platform, an online platform, where people who are the agents on one side can actually put their properties online, and also the folks who need housing can actually then go on there and search, right, for the properties that they need, and then transactions happen. And it kind of makes sense, in theory. And so we invested in 2012. As I said, 5-6 years later, it's dead, right? But again, it was what then led to me becoming an angel investor, right, and writing other checks, and the rest, as they say, is history. But again, what I wanted to share from the example was, why did they fail? And what do I think they could have done differently, right, to succeed? I think they're still battling with my slides, so I'm just going to go on talking. So again, so when I look at founders, I think the first thing I tell people is understanding the problem you are trying to solve. Last year, at Lofty Inc., we reviewed about 1,500 decks from founders last year alone. So I see a lot of decks and talk to a lot of founders. One big issue is when you have founders who do not fully understand the problem they're trying to solve. Which is why when we invest, we ask 3 key questions. We say, why you? Why now? How big? The why you for us is, why are you the best person to solve this problem? What is your unique understanding of this space? What is your unfair advantage? Why would you win in this space, right? And a lot of that goes back to your partnerships, your relationships, your personal problems you've had in that in that space. The understanding the domain experience you probably have in that space, right? That allows you to fully understand a problem than just coming up with solutions. Because a lot of times, especially in this space, what you see is techie people who then want to build solutions for the sector without understanding the needs of the sector. And then when you try one approach and it fails, that's the end, even though they've raised investor money. And the analogy I like to give people is an analogy of a mousetrap. So if as a founder, you come to me and say you are trying to build a better or a bigger mousetrap, I probably would not invest. But if you come to me and you say you are trying to solve the problem of mice infestation, then you have my ears. And you'd ask, what's the difference? You're killing, you're disposing of mice. The difference is in the first instance, you have a solution looking for a problem. Now, a better mousetrap might be the solution. But if you try a better mousetrap and it doesn't work, the market doesn't accept it, that's the end for you. But if you understand that the problem is mice infestation, then maybe what you need to do is what they call sole, right? In traffic, those things they buy, they sell, that you buy from the traffic people and then put in the house. Maybe it's indoor seed, right? Maybe it's Evostick, maybe it's traps in the house. Maybe it's even getting the paid piper to sink the mice out of town. But the issue is, if you have a fundamental understanding of the problem you're solving, it allows you to adapt. Because in reality, most of the time, the solution you start with is not what you're going to end up with. But if you have a deep understanding of the problem, it allows you to then be able to adapt and to pivot as needed. So I think that's the first thing we look at, right? We're trying to scale. What is your fundamental understanding of this problem? And why are you trying to solve this? And why have you chosen this? And then what's your unfair advantage? What relationships do you have in the market? Next thing for us then, when you look at pathways to growth, you have your idea. It's, can you build an MVP, right? Can you build a minimal viable solution that someone is willing to use? And a lot of people jump this. A lot of people go and build fancy solutions, spend investor money, and then 6 months later, no one needs the product, right? And money has been spent. So a lot of times the idea is, can you find a small group of people in that sector who have that pain and who are willing to at least allow you to experiment? And when I was speaking earlier about how they incubate and work with our partners, and I think a lot of times this is missing. Most founders are so fixated on investors, right? The first thing, they have an idea. The next thing is, I need an investor. Have you found customers who are willing to pay for this? And that's the idea. Even if the first thing is a pilot, a free pilot, but you have found people who are willing to use your tool to solve their problem and allow you to then build around that. As an investor, that is what then becomes attractive to me, that they are willing users of this tool. So you have to build that minimally viable product that is then tested against the market. Versus you build a full product and then you go to the market and then you're trying to scale that. Then the other thing is actually then people. At the heart of this, I think, is, can you attract the talent to work with you? When I look at some of the failures we've had in our portfolio, you start seeing team issues, right? Founder issues, incompatibility among co-founders, among folks, team members. And so a lot of times when companies fail, if it's not product market fit, it's usually people issues, right? You have founders who cannot attract smart people to work with them because they want to dominate. I own the idea, so I must be the person who has the best, idea about how to progress, right? So as a founder, when we invest, we're looking at not just you, but the entire team. What kind of people can you attract to solve this problem with you? And let me go on a tangent here. When people ask, why is it that most of the people who raised funds especially in the fintech space or in the tech space generally, are folks who have studied abroad? And you start asking, is there a discrimination there? And my answer is not necessarily. The challenge is, the wider the network, the more people you're able to attract. I went to Ife. Anybody who went to Ife here? Great Ife. Exactly. Okay. So yeah, but the problem is, if Ife is the only school you went to, and that's the only network you have, you will struggle when it comes to time to scale your business. It's the truth, right? So let me step back. One of our early companies was a company called Fora, that then became Andela, right? At a point in time when Fora was about to die, the reason why Fora survived and became Andela was because Inyabo Eji founder met with Jeremy at a conference, he then convinced to come join him to create what became Andela. Now, if he was limited only to his local network, that might have been a problem. Okay. Okay, they finally got my slides in 10 minutes into the talk, so I have 10 minutes more. But walk through it. But you get the idea, right? Your network also matters. Because, again, at different stages in your journey, what you need is going to be quite different. And your ability to attract talent to attract people to help you scale that business is going to be very, very important. And some people they do well at the ideation stage, at the seed stage, but for them to scale the business, they can't, right? There's some founders who are great at innovating, but when it comes to managing the company, they can't do that. Can they find the people who can help them do that? That's the question. Okay, so next slide. Yeah, so this is where I started from. Again, that was one of my first investments ever in the tech space. 2012, late 2012, HotPay. The premise was very straightforward. People need to find houses. Instead of them walking from place to place to place to do that, let's help them use technology to do that. It failed. And again, some of the reasons why it failed is what I'm sharing. It's the people, it's the ability to find talent, it's their understanding of the sector, it's their building full solutions even before, having the market adopt what they needed. And so when the topic was posed to me saying, how do you go from idea to unicorn? I thought of this slide. A lot of people think, you know what, I'm just going to have an idea, I'm going to build it, it's going to become $1 billion company, and that's it. The reality is more what you have at the bottom, right? The first problem is this. When you start building a startup and all you have in your mind is building a unicorn, I think you are starting on the wrong footing. Because you are too fixated on valuation. Because a unicorn is simply a company that is valued at above $1 billion. And I don't think that should be your focus. It should be about value. Now, when you start talking, building a company that serves 1 billion people, building a company that earns $1 billion in revenue, that is the kind of mindset you should have. So that you don't get fixated on just building something and optimizing just for valuation. Again, in reality, what you're going to have is what you have at the bottom. You're going to have dips, you're going to have ups, and your ability to navigate through those ups and downs is really what differentiates you as a founder who can build something that lasts and stands the test of time. Next slide, please. Next. Okay. Again, a lot of times, I don't think we do enough justice to telling failure stories. Everybody comes and tells the Flutterwave story. They tell the Andela story. They tell the Paystack story. And everyone just thinks that's, it's so easy. I think we need to spend more time talking about what failed and why. And that allows founders to avoid making those mistakes, right? Learning from other people's experiences versus doing those things themselves. The reality is most startups will fail. There's a success bias. You only hear the story of those who succeeded. You forget that every year, like this year, about $5 billion has been invested in African startups. The reality is, check in 5 years' time, very few of them are going to be alive. And it's sad, but that's the reality of it, right? And again, you can see some of the reasons why they fail. Lack of product market fit, right? Do you have a product that the market really wants and is able to pay for, right? Operation issues, team issues. I've spoken about all of this. So as a founder who's trying to build something that will scale, it's very important you understand why failures occur and how do you improve your chances of succeeding. Next slide. Yeah. And so again, for me, when you're building, it's really about, like I said, why you, the founder themselves and the team, what you want, your vision, right? And your unfair advantage. That there's something there's a thousand things you could be doing or you could be building. But when you decide on the one you want to build, there has to be that unfair advantage you have, that uniqueness you have, that you can do differently. If anybody else can do exactly what you can do, I think you are better off spending your time building something else or doing something else with your life, right? So again, as a founder, you need to be very clear on who your customers are. Who needs this? Who is going to pay for it? And sometimes, those who are going to pay for it might actually be different from those who need it. So you also need to be able to figure that out. Sometimes the payer, so for instance, if you're in the education industry, the end user might be the kid, might be the child, but it's not the one paying for it, it's the parents. And so if you're just marketing to the child without factoring in the parent, you probably would fail. So again, understanding who pays for it is also key. If you're doing a pop tech solution near a school, for instance, is it the student paying for it? Is it their parent or the guardian paying for it? You can be able to figure out who's the end user and who's paying for it, right? And why they want it, right? How they want it and why would they pay for it, right? Being very clear on this before you take investor money, I think is very key. Next slide. And I spoke about this earlier. getting your MVP. Again, I think usually people go to investors first, and they let investors judge what they build. And I think that's a very wrong approach. Always go to the market first. Let the market determine what you build, what is needed. And then is that traction that you then take to investors. Because they see that there's something the market actually needs, right? Being able to identify what they need and what needs to change. Investors don't know anything, sincerely. I'm an investor myself, right? We see a lot we really don't know. So it's really the market that knows. Yes, we can guide, but again, being in touch with the market is very, very important. Finding people who truly need it. And so a lot of times, immersing yourself in the domain, right? You want to be a PropTech founder. Spend time a day in the life of your user, right? Spend time understanding where the shoe pinches your the user, right? Before you come up with those solutions. Next slide. And then again, it's about talent, right? At the end of the day, you are only as good as the people you have. When we hire in our companies, I always say every new hire must increase the average of the company. If you are hiring someone and they are not smarter than you, you are bringing down the average of your company. That's clear. But a lot of times, due to ego and people don't want to hire people who are smarter than them. But what ends up happening is you end up doing the work for them. You are the only one in the room who can make decisions, right? It's very key as a startup founder, as whatever founder, always find people who are smarter than you. That's how you increase the average. That's how you plug your own gaps. So when we're investing, we're looking at the founding team and we're asking, okay, does the co-founder, do they complement who you are as a founder? And then we're also asking and saying, these are the gaps. What are your next couple of hires? And what gaps are they going to plug? And then can you sell your vision to people to attract them to come work for you? If you cannot do that, the startup will most likely fail. No matter how much you pay people. Because again, this is a marathon, it's a long-term game. You cannot sell the vision to workers, to employees, to come help build what you want to build, you will struggle. Next slide. And then, this is one of the most important, customer acquisition. And you don't see people spend a lot of time on this. User analysis, understanding the niche you want to play in, right? How do you convert your customers? How do you nurture them? How do you keep them? How do you reduce churn, right, among your customers, right? How do you drive traffic? And again, depending on how much capital you have. So now you have to be very scrappy, right? If you cannot afford to advertise on TV, can you use social media, right? Can you use digital media? Do you get flyers out in the street? Do you go to industry conventions, right? And engage people there, right? Being able to find where your users are and meeting them at that point, I think is quite important. And at the end of the day, it's about sales. Sales, right? Even more than fundraise, right? Next slide. Funding. Right? So when we talk about funding, I think, again, a lot of people start from here, and it's really where you should end. And part of the question you should ask yourself is, what is the right kind of funding for my business, right? For this opportunity. Is it bank funding, right? Is it friends and families? Is it angels? Is it profit sharing, right? Or is it VC? Now, if you go to take VC funding, you have to understand the goals of the VC. VCs want high growth. They want fast growth, and they want it fast, right? So they want you scaling, even sometimes even before you're ready to scale. And if that's not the kind of business you want to build, then don't take that money. The minute you take that money, you don't have a choice, right? And so sometimes you just want to go slowly, and maybe you don't want to go fast. And this is, again, I was in Texas recently, and I was at an event, and these are all founders we have backed, right? It was just interesting to see our founders in the same space, and some of them are in the PropTech space, in fintech and different. But again, I think the key for me is not every opportunity needs VC funding, and it's very important that you understand the kind of funds you are taking. And sometimes it's not even about VC funding. I've seen people start businesses and they go meet a rich uncle who they give 30% of the business to. Well, next year, they want to scale up the business and they need money. And the uncle does not allow them to dilute his holdings in the business, right? And that's the end of the business. So it's very key before you raise money from people that you're very clear about the kind of business you want to build, who needs that solution, right? What problem you are solving, and what are your future plans. Next slide. I think that's probably there's just one more slide. Next slide. Okay. And this is where I round up. Again, the topic I was giving was from idea to unicorn. And I started with my failure story, Hot Bay, right? Hot Bay was the first investment I ever made as an angel investor, and it failed. But you know what it did? It actually led me to my unicorn. So last year, we had 2 of our companies become unicorns, Flutterwave and Andela. But the reason I ever invested in those people was because I started my angel investing in Hot Bay, which failed, but I continued to persist and to go on to invest, and ended up investing in Andela and Flutterwave, which became unicorns. So the lesson is this. You are never sure that your first idea is what's going to take you to the end point. But the idea is persisting, right? Adapting, pivoting when you need. You might fail your first starter, you might fail the second one, it might be the third one or the fourth one that ends you up there. But again, it's not about the end point, it's about the lessons you learn in the process. It's about who you become in the process, right? To get to the end point. And so if you keep those lessons very focused on what problem you are solving, who are the people you're solving it for, and the skill sets you need to build in that process, hiring people, finding the right people, and having a very clear vision of how you want to change the world, eventually, you find something that works. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Idris Bello. I think we should applaud him one more time. He had a very short time, but it was loaded, it was crisp, and of course, very insightful.